Aids Guelph Hilat Siam Aids Jelachas Sahanap Tanatsanate Chisle Sanet Sayanich Laid Pathlapet lungs. I'd like to recognize the indigenous people that have spent that have lived here in this place for countless generations. My name is Saanich. I'm Saanich. My father's family has spent, well, lived their entire lives, lived, worked, and played our entire lives in the Saanich territory. And now I am the first Saanich person to represent our territory in the legislature of BC. I was raised in the village of Chotlip, which is one of 4 Saanich villages, and I came to the Green Party when Elizabeth May moved into Saanich Gulf Islands. I was a district councillor, District of Central Saanich councillor, and was one of the first, if not, I think maybe the only district councillor at the time in the 2011 election to endorse Elizabeth. She came and visited our home, and my sister's a councillor for Chotlip Nation, First Nation. And so we've got a highly charged political family, both at on the reserve as well. We were in municipal, and then and now provincial. I had spent last night on Air Canada Rouge flight, the red eye, the Rouge eye, Rouge or whatever, and had my iPad and wrote. Took some notes, and just a brilliant speech on my iPad. And then I never connected it to the internet. And I intended on, I was over there, I'm like, okay, great, I'll get my speech. Well, it's not here. It's still sitting. So I'm gonna wing it a little bit here today, and I just wanted to first acknowledge the territory that we're in, and then acknowledge the fact that our campaign just maybe 10 or 11, 12 weeks ago, however many weeks ago it was supported by so many Green Party of Ontario volunteers who set their lives aside and got in the airplane and flew out across the country and didn't just spend 1 or 2 days like I'm spending here, but spent a couple, I think, of the volunteers spent more than a couple of weeks. I know we had a volunteer from Quebec who spent like a month in our riding, giving their time to help us get elected and get first past the post. And so when Mike Schreiner sent me a Facebook message and said, hey, would you come out here and speak at my campaign launch or please vote for him. It'd be really embarrassing if none of the above won today. Like, I flew all the way across the country to congratulate Mike for his big victory, and so he really needs your support, like in a big way today. I'm hoping that you came here all today ready to vote for Mike Schreiner. Anyway, I took a very little time. In fact, the only time that I took was the time that it took me to have the conversation with my family to ensure that, I've got 2 little kids, to ensure that they were okay with me taking 3 or 4 days to come out here and support Mike. And other than that, it was absolutely no questions asked. And in fact, I look forward to being out here in June of 2018 to return the favor. Mike was incredibly effective on the doorstep in Saanich North and the islands, knocking on doors for me. And I would say that my eagerness to come out here next June is twofold. First, of course, it's to elect a Green MPP to Queen's Park in Toronto. The second piece, of course, is to march down Yonge Street with the Toronto Maple Leafs when they win the Stanley Cup. So the timing could not be more perfect for an election here in Ontario, and I know that Mike probably has now got some work that he has to do with the Ottawa Greens. As he brought me out here, and now I'm cheering for the Leafs. So, but you have a year to mend fences with Ottawa. Is that Ottawa? I'm sorry. Anyway, a lifelong Leafs fan, so it's always wonderful to be out here. It's been an absolutely thrilling time over the past number of weeks in BC politics. BC politics never ceases to amaze. And I wanted to talk a little bit about our campaign, a little bit about why I believe that we were successful in British Columbia. We ran a campaign on trust. And there has been a lack of trust of politicians in British Columbia, and perhaps right across the country, and provincial, local, provincial, and the federal government over the past number of years. And this was a message that was clearly going to be the ballot box question for us, was trust, and a lack of trust in the provincial government. We had a Liberal government, BC Liberal government. Unlike the Ontario Liberals, it's more of a, they call themselves the Free Enterprise Coalition, although there's nothing free about their enterprise. The way that you got things done in British Columbia was basically to make big donations, and so it wasn't free enterprise really. It was a very expensive form of enterprise. But it was a coalition between the Liberals, the Big L Liberals, and the Big C Conservatives, and we don't have really a conservative party, and so they came together back in the 1990s, and they've ruled the province for the last 16 years. And we had seen many of the hallmarks of those kind of governments. We've seen a growing gap between those who have and those who don't. We saw a hollowing out of our education system. We saw a hollowing out of our healthcare system. We heard a lot of rhetoric about how we were the best economy in the province, and yet what we were seeing on the streets of downtown Vancouver and the streets of Victoria was clearly not acceptable, people being left behind, and in a way that was really quite tragic. The visuals that you see in the city cores, whether it be in urban British Columbia or rural British Columbia, are frankly not acceptable, and we knew that it was time for a change, and it was time for a change that people could count on. It was one that was based around trust. Who can you trust? And the BC Greens were the party of trust. We've been running on a message around climate change and around supporting people for decades. That message has never changed. We run on principle. We act on principle. We are driven and guided by the 6 core principles, the ones that we share with all Green Party, all Green parties, or most Green parties, not just here in Canada, but around the world. And so I was listening to Age of Persuasion on CBC, and it was interesting because Terry O'Reilly said, a principle's not a principle until it costs you money. And in the first week of the legislature, when Christy Clark was trying to, and the BC Liberals were trying to achieve some level of confidence from the BC Greens, they dangled a bunch of money in front of us. A surprising bill that said, we'll make you right now, you can become an official party, which would have given us all a raise. And I looked at my colleagues, we looked at each other, we had just a few seconds to act, and it was immediate. We didn't even talk to each other. There was not even any question. We were not going to vote on this bill. Principle's not a principle until it costs you money, and we were not tempted by the money that was dangled in front of us. We are driven by principle. Stay driven by those principles. Make sure, because that will be what sets the Green Party here in Ontario apart from the others as they are polling, looking for which issues are going to be winner issues in the upcoming election. They're going to be deciding that based on polling. You, as the Greens, will stand on principle. You'll make and take positions and decisions on things, on issues, because it's what you believe in. You'll stand up for it because as candidates and as campaigners, you believe in that. It forms part of the foundation that you stand on, not something that can be traded like we saw with the BC Liberals in a throne speech. Campaign on one thing in April and May, and then deliver something opposite. In fact, deliver what I campaigned on in June. And the reason why the BC Liberals are where they are at right now, with no leader come next Friday and no MLA in Kelowna West come next Friday, is because they were so willing to trade their so-called principles at the time when it was most visible for people to see in their throne speech. And what ended up happening was the question that was being asked was, what do they stand for? And I think that whoever the leader of the BC Liberals ends up being in the coming months is going to have a significant challenge, or perhaps even an opportunity to redefine the party, to define the principles that drive that party, and it will be a big job for them. But I think British Columbia will be much better off when the BC Liberal Party does have a defined, and returns to a defined set of principles, whether I agree with them or not. It's important that they are not directionless, that they have principles, and that they stick to them. Let's hope that they stick to them. Be courageous in the upcoming election campaign. Don't be afraid to stand up for what you believe in. People see it. People see that courage. We said some things we proposed an $8 billion with a B, $8 billion investment in education. An $8 billion investment in education, which, you know, was something that I think made us very vulnerable. Because people said, where are you going to get the money from? And we said, the money is here. It's about priorities. And this is the priority that we have set, is to invest in education. Because we know that in an educated society, we make better decisions around healthcare, better decisions around the environment, better decisions on a daily basis. And so for us, as we're moving our province from primarily a resource-driven economy, although it's been driven a lot by real estate, to a 21st century economy where the resource extraction is supported by much better decision-making around what we have and how we use it, driven by a commitment of intergenerational equity, where it's not just ours, it's ours and future generations, and we have a responsibility to future generations, not just for our children, but as well for the offspring of these other living beings that are around us, these trees and the animals, the wildlife, and the habitat that sustains them. The Saanich culture that I'm from, there is very little difference between a human being and the Cullthullumachin, the killer whale, or the human being and the Staitnook, the salmon that you see on my campaign over there, my campaign shirts. They're really important that there's very little separation between that. I think that it's time to start to come back to that, where we're reconnecting with the natural world. We're reconnecting with our relatives in nature. So be courageous, stand up for what you believe in, put it out there. And if I was to say one thing, I would say, make sure that your campaign platform, make sure that this is the best campaign platform that you've ever written. One of the fundamental differences between the 2013 campaign, in which I was 379 votes from winning, to the 2017 campaign, which I won by 4,000 votes, was the platform that I ran on. And Mike had a chance to see that platform. Your volunteers had a chance to see the platform. It was very clear. It was founded on our principles, and it was underpinned by everything that we believe in, and it was extremely progressive in so many ways. It was bold in so many ways, and courageous, and it made it so easy to run for the BC Green Party because of the platform that we ran on. So guaranteed, I had way better stuff than I'm saying right now on my iPad. I can promise you that. It was the best speech I've ever written in my entire life. And to think I flew out here all the way to just wing it. No, I didn't actually. I was much better prepared. I'm happy to answer some questions, because what's happened in the last, I don't know what the timing of this is, but in the last number of weeks, what's happened in British Columbia hasn't happened very often in Canada. They said, oh, you know what, there was one brilliant piece that I had in there that I'm going to share with you now. They're going to tell you that one MPP or 2 or 3 or 4 MPPs don't make a difference. Tell them that's not true. You've seen the example in British Columbia. 3 MLAs. 3 MLAs. And they said, what does it feel like to have the balance of power? And I said, I don't have the balance of power. I have the balance of responsibility. All 87 MLAs have a responsibility to look after British Columbia. I am one of those. My 2 colleagues and I make up 3 of those. But it came down to us. And in the world of majority governments, where we've had one party rule with absolute authority, and in our first past the post system, you never know what's going to come out of it. And so if you're standing on the doorstep and they say, no, I'm going to vote for this other party because it's safe and that's what we always do, and we don't want to get this, so we're going to try for that, and we don't really like that, but it's better than having that, and they're trying to play all this mathematics, and the parties around you are all feeding to that mathematics and say, everybody's confused. Nobody wants to vote anymore because political parties are deliberately confusing the whole thing to try to achieve an outcome that's beneficial to them. Say, just look to British Columbia. In British Columbia, 3 Green MLAs had a considerable amount of responsibility, and look what they did with it. They created a stable government. They didn't take positions in cabinet. They didn't take money for the sake of taking money. They just simply tried to achieve a stable government founded on the principles that they ran on. And that's exactly the kind of model that I hope that the Green Party of Ontario, and I'm certain that the Green Party of Ontario will run out. So.